Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning, this is Driscoll, also in Dallas. Today we are welcoming renowned stage director and our friend Paul Curran to Light Talk.
And this is David, coming to you from my penthouse studio in the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Well, welcome everyone to episode 211, and this is our second show of our fifth season. And today we welcome back our wonderful Lumen brother and friend Driscoll Otto as guest host on Light Talk. Welcome back to the show, Driscoll.
Hey, thanks. I'm thrilled to be back and excited to have our friend Paul with us.
Yes, that's correct. And how better can we start season 5 than to have our good friend Paul Curran with us on Light Talk. Hi, Paul.
Hi guys, thank you so much. I finally made it to season 5.
It took 5 years.
5 years, thank you. What an honor, thrilled. Totally thrilled.
It's like Game of Thrones, it gets better every season.
It gets better every season, except the last season. Let's hope this isn't your last. No, I'm genuinely thrilled to be with you guys because I have listened very often to your podcast, so I'm very happy with this.
And your brain still works. Even after listening to the podcast.
Yeah, well.
It may have taken you 5 years, or actually a little more than 4 years, but you are the first director that we've had on the show.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm greatly honored.
That's right.
Scandalized, but greatly honored.
Well, you're more of a designer too. Come on. You're really a director-designer, which is one of the things we'll be talking about today. But anyway, let's get started. And let me tell you a little bit about my dear friend Paul and his amazing career. Paul Curran is a much-awarded Scottish stage director with productions at the Metropolitan Opera, the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, La Scala, La Fenice, Royal Opera House, Copenhagen, the LA Opera, the Lyric Opera of Chicago, the National Theatre of Tokyo, Covent Garden Festival, the Mariinsky Theatre in St. Petersburg, the Garsington Opera, Maggio Musicale Florence, the Norwegian National Opera, and the Berlin Philharmonic, among many, many others.
And a bar in Brooklyn.
And a bar in Brooklyn. That was a great gig. That was a great bar.
I noticed you didn't mention Wales here. You didn't mention Cardiff.
Very strange. We will talk about that later.
Okay. As a matter of fact, Paul and I have been to most of these places together, which is even crazier. A graduate of the National Institute of Dramatic Arts, Sydney. Immediately upon graduating, he was assistant to director Baz Luhrmann on A Midsummer Night's Dream at the Australian Opera for 2 years. He was artistic director of the Norwegian National Opera from 2007 until 2012, running the company in Oslo's new opera house, the most technologically advanced opera theater in the world at the time. Paul speaks several languages, 9 in all, and has translated plays by Chekhov, Ostrovsky, and Molière, as well as writing his own play, The Rehearsal, performed at Disney Hall with the LA Phil. He was nominated as Director of the Year at the International Opera Awards for 2020 and has previously won 2 Helpman Awards in Australia, the Premio Abbiati Critics Award in Italy, the Bravo Award in Russia, and has been nominated for the same in Canada and Ireland. Recent productions include La Donna del Lago at the Metropolitan Opera, Santa Fe Opera,
The Flying Dutchman.
I know it's a Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman at the Maggio Musicale Firenze, Golden Cockerel at the Santa Fe Opera, Dallas Opera, the Covancina. Yes, Covancina? Oh, Covancina, baby. He's not even helping me. He's just sitting there, just watching me struggle.
Our listeners won't know the difference. Just make it up. Make it up as you go.
Some fucking prom at the BBC.
You people teach in universities worldwide. I think we're finished with my biography. He directs operas and musicals. Done. We're done. Let's not murder anything else.
Oh my God. My Fair Lady, Teatro San Carlo and Teatro Regino Torino, Lady Macbeth at Mitsensk, Tosca and Othello at Canadian Opera, Peter Grimes at the Norwegian National Opera, Martian National Opera, and Savellina Festival, Billy Budd and Albert Herring at the Santa Fe Opera, Daphne Ariadne at Teatro La Fenice.
I'm all over this. I think everybody's bored with this.
Oh, he's done it all. Okay.
I feel very, very old.
Well, join the club, except for Driscoll. Driscoll's the child here.
He only looks like a child, and if this were in television, you could see he's a hairy child, but he just looks like a child.
He does.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, David. It was flawless.
It was. Okay, so hey, wait a second. We forgot to talk about Tosca in Toronto. That's coming up.
Yes, Tosca is coming up.
Are we going back to Toronto again?
We certainly are.
Oh,
yes, it's like the 6th or 7th revival of that Tosca. I'm thinking of putting in my biography, but I'm scared of you reading it out, that I'm going to become a specialist in Tosca Torontos, because it's all I do there. Every couple of years I do Tosca in Toronto.
And let me guess, we'll be there in January, right?
No, actually, I think it's the summer or the spring. I think it's
so it's like March. Oh, that's much better. Okay, cool. All right, just so everyone knows up front, I have known Paul as a friend and colleague since 2005, and he has graciously taken me all over the world. Driscoll has also worked with him on many shows, including that spectacular La Donna del Lago at the Met. The three of us worked together a few years ago on that crazy Flying Dutchman in Firenze, so let's just say that we know a lot about each other, and it's a good thing that we're not drinking during the show. So Steve has our first question for Paul.
Oh, we finally get to a question. Paul has been waiting for this. Okay, softball question. How did you get started in this crazy business?
So I started my directing career following a dance career. I'd been a dancer, professional ballet dancer, got badly injured. My left hip came out of the socket in a show in Germany, just outside Stuttgart. What I remember is as I fell, honestly, as I heard this pop as my hip came out the socket, I remember thinking, this career is over, the dance career. Thank God this is over. I just remember thinking, move on to something else. So it was my partner at the time that said, I was like, I need to do something else in my life. What am I going to do? I'd been a stage manager, an interpreter, translator. I'd done all of that. And my partner said, well, you should definitely be a director. And I was like, why would I be a director? Why would I do that? And he said, well, you love the sound of your own voice. You always think you're right, and you're bossing people around constantly. And I was like, okay, so I guess that's the list. Thank you. And I applied for drama school. I honestly didn't think I'd get in, but I did get in. I got into the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, and graduated as a director. It was really one of the most amazing experiences of my life, studying acting, studying directing, studying dramaturgy, studying light, because we had classes in lighting design. This is the bit where I'd name drop. I graduated with Kate Blanchett. We were in the same class. We were always next to each other because of B and C. And then when I got out, a young director was looking for an assistant to do A Midsummer Night's Dream with him that had a drama background and a movement background. It was Baz Luhrmann. He watched a rehearsal I was doing of a show. Only time I ever saw him sit still for 3 hours. And he chose me out of many candidates, and that's how I started. The real big thing that happened after that was I then got jobs really based on the fact that I could speak languages. So I went to the Rome Opera, to Covent Garden, various other places, because I had Russian, Italian, and various other languages. And that was the beginning of the career. And that was now, next year, since graduation, it'll be 30 years. 30 years ago.
What got you interested in languages?
I grew up in the projects in the East End of Glasgow. Glasgow was bombed during the war, and they moved everybody out to the projects. But when they moved them to the projects, they built these horrible, shitty houses that had damp problems and no heating and all sorts of things. It was a particularly horrible place. And languages at school were kind of exotic and fantastic for me. So I knew this is my way out. If I study languages, I get to get out of here. I get to go to university, and I can move. So that was really the buzz. I did French and Italian in high school, and I wanted to learn German, but they didn't teach German in my school. They taught it at the school across the street. But that was a Protestant school. Mine was a Catholic school, and they wouldn't let me go. So I thought, okay, screw this. I found a night school, and I forged my father's signature because I needed parental permission. He wouldn't have given a rat's ass anyway. And I did German. They only found out when I got the exam results back. So that was the beginning of the language thing.
So, Paul, last time I visited you, you were in the enchanting Albany. This apartment looks different. Is this in San Francisco?
Yes, I now live literally a block from the Opera House in San Francisco. Actually, maybe it's 2 blocks from the Opera House in San Francisco, because my husband, Mike, is a doctor. He's an eye surgeon.
Like a good Jewish boy, you married a doctor. I taught you well.
The closest we are to Jews is we're both Catholic, so we know that our people killed Christ. That's as close as we go.
Everyone wants a doctor in the family.
Everybody. It doesn't have to be Jewish to be a doctor. You're just smart.
Everybody
you just
needs an eye
learned.
doctor.
It took you a while, but you figured it out. After working with me, you figured it out.
So he got this gig here, which is a very difficult field to get into, and California is particularly difficult for doctors to get into for residency. So 2 years ago, we moved to San Francisco, and here we are. I love it. It's a great city.
And it's a great apartment. He's got these great cat runners on his walls. So
I put up cat shelves. So we have a little cat highway where I've created it that to get up there, they've got to jump in various things. It's one way of getting the lazy little things doing exercise. So you throw a few treats up there. You don't even need to do it, but if you want them exercising, you throw treats up in the cat shelves and
it's
they
great
run up and they
entertainment.
do their thing.
What are your cats' names again?
Our cats are Abyssinian cats. So Mike named them King Tut and Osiris.
There you go.
At one point during this chat, one or both of them will make a visit.
That's wonderful.
Present themselves in front of us.
Well, we'll do a screen capture and we'll send and we'll post it. But yeah, those cats are beautiful. And speaking of beautiful, your husband is beautiful.
He's a very beautiful man. He's a beautiful looking man, and he's a lovely human being. He's
incredible.
Really fantastic
Between the two of you, you've got humanity galore. Let's get back to the whole process here. What qualities do you look for when you put together a creative team? Could you also discuss how the synergy of the team works for you when developing designs for a production?
So building a team it takes years of experience and practice to build the right team. And over the years, I've worked with many different teams. But what do I look for? To be honest, I always look for like-minded people. What does this person want to do? Does this person want to tell stories in theater? Is this person interested in being famous or being scandalous? Then I have no interest in that person. Is this person interested in, opera or music or whatever? It's vastly important to me that you have the team that is all of the same opinion as to why we're doing theater. So that comes with recommendations, it comes from meeting people. For example, 2 good examples are right in front of me. One is Driscoll, who came as a recommendation when we were doing a show in New York, who's somebody, Court Watson, whose opinion I trusted implicitly. And that worked out, and here we are all these years later working together. And the other is your good self, Mr. Jacques. Uh-huh. You didn't come as a recommendation. No.
I thought that Ken recommended me.
Certainly no. You came like a bad social disease. Here it is, you're stuck with it, this is what you're doing. And I was like, no, I was all grand back then. I was like, no. And this, by the way, was not 2005. Senility is ringing through. It was 2002.
Oh, he cavalled.
Midsummer Night's Dream, 2002.
Right.
In 2004, we did The Tales of Hoffman, just to, reset the brain cells there. So it's nearly 20 years. And you came because you were the resident lighting designer at Central City Opera. And eventually I was like, okay, we'll see how it goes. And we hit it off. Well, apart from the fact that you scared 2 board operators away in the first week.
I fired them,
that was
basically.
Okay. You did. Yeah. They ran screaming from the building.
Clearly, David did not carry treats in his pocket to keep them at the console.
Exactly.
Didn't even give treats to me. So what do I look for? I look for like-minded people. And that takes getting to know somebody. That takes respecting their work. And then you build a relationship. And your question was, how does the synergy of the team work for me when I'm directing putting the team together on a design? I'm very interested in everybody's opinion. I may or may not use it because to me, the most important thing is not the single idea of the director or of the designer or any one designer, but actually the right synergy of ideas for the project. So whoever's got the best idea, that's what we put forward for this particular production that we're doing. That's kind of vitally important to me. Otherwise, it's pointless. And of course, I've worked with people in the past where it didn't work out and I wasn't very happy, but I don't work with those people anymore.
Well, let me ask you kind of a follow-up to that, maybe. What would you suggest for young directors, in their training, specifically their training perhaps in lighting or the technical process that would assist them?
Okay, good question, because as far as I'm concerned, and I think both other gentlemen we're talking to would agree with this, but I've always approached lighting, first of all, from a technical point of view before an artistic point of view, in that part of the training I had at drama school was technical, in that you had to understand, back in the day, understand what a parcan was, what a Fresnel was, what they did, what a gel was, what frost was, all of those words, all of those things. And if you didn't understand, they were like, well, how the hell are you going to light the show? Because it's not just the lighting director's responsibility to do that. If you understand what those things do, you can have a much better conversation, because when the light designer is talking to you about various things, you can say, oh, I get it. So we can do this with these lamp instruments, and we can do that with the other instruments, etc. So my training was actually technical. And one of the things I did before I went to drama school, actually, was I was an interpreter at the Edinburgh Festival. And I had a very great luck, I think, to work with lighting designers. Actually, they were nearly all Russians, overnight, but with Scottish crew. I didn't realize, by the way, that you could light during the day. I thought lighting was exclusively done overnight because I'd done it so often at the Edinburgh Festival. I was astonished when we actually were lighting shows during the day, because the festival's so, frenetic. But I learned the technical side of lighting really there, because I had to interpret all this, so I had to study, had to ask. As a director, get yourself the knowledge of what the technical part of lighting is. What is the difference in the hue of something and the color of something? What is the difference in light values? How is the spectrum of color? How does it jump at one point or not jump? But all the simple things that you need to understand. So I would say schools should teach directors lighting, and schools should also teach directors, once you've got a good idea of the basis of it, then what the artistic interpretation is with it, because it's as much of a tool as understanding brushes or strokes or using oils or using acrylics in painting or a pencil. If you don't understand those media, then you're never going to be able to paint or draw anything. The artistic side of it is, I think it's the icing on the cake, but I think you really need a basis in the technical part of it. One other little thing, the number of directors I either assisted or I watched who were like, I want it all blue here. And they start, and 3 seconds later, they're like, well, why isn't it blue? And you're saying, well, it's a computer and it's a human being, and what blue? Where, what foot, you didn't ask for blue here, you didn't ask for it to be focused in this area, we need to refocus these moving lights, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't take place in 3 seconds. Remember Driscoll, when we did a rather famous show, a rather famous theatre, and the rather famous director of that theatre, we started at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 9:04 said, oh, is it going to look like that?
I do remember that.
So, Steve, the answer to your question is get educated, study it. These days there's YouTube and all sorts, but understand the technique so that you can use the art better.
Perfect.
So, to counter that, how important do you think it is for designers to study and understand directing?
Very important. You don't need to know how to direct, but I think as a designer, you need to know the process of what a director goes through and where you fit into that process with not only the director, but with the team. I mean, most projects come because a director's asked to do it, and it'll come through the vision of that director, or if he's working with a team, he or she's working with a team and they've worked together a lot, a sort of communal vision for that. But it generally always comes from the director's vision, I would say. But understanding the difficulties of, if you're doing an opera, how many chorus are going to be standing in the way of the booms you've got at the side? how do we backlight this number of people without them looking like one fat singer with 50 heads? How do we, what's the difference in front lighting and lighting for a dance piece? I mean, I use a lot of what you would call dance lighting in my shows because having been a dancer and knowing what it is, I know it shapes bodies a lot better. It gives the body 3 dimensions rather than just, here's Mariah Carey in a follow spot look. Not that we want to see Mariah in 3 dimensions these days, just adding that in there. Whoa, shade to Mariah. Yeah, so I think you need to understand what the process is for a director and what they go through.
It's really interesting that we're talking about this now because all of us have worked with a lot of directors. Along with my dear friend Ken, I must say that Paul is one of the only directors I've ever worked with who truly understands lighting. There's a great synergy that happens at the table with Paul, and I'm sure Driscoll could second that. When the 3 of us were working together, it was even better. But we had some other issues in that too, more technical, that had nothing to do with the lighting. But all that being said, it really is an amazing synergetic experience when you were working with a director who understands light. I think that for lighting designers, it is important to take directing and to understand directing, and for obviously directors to understand lighting and atmosphere and dramatic space and all that stuff that can change. Because a lot of times, when I'm in a rehearsal with Paul, he'll like say, "Oh no, darling, you want to move over there because there's going to be this great light that's going to hit you at this point." Because Paul and I had discussed it before. I just see a lot of directors who don't even want to know until they're on stage, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, there's that light there."
Yeah, but why would you do that? Because it just causes drama. Then the drama's in the show, not in the putting the show on. Exactly. Yeah, but it's planning. So I remember my first lighting class was with a fantastic Australian lighting designer called Tony Youlden. Tony was a technical director and he was a lighting director at NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney. And the first class was we went into a studio and Tony, always remember this, he held up his hand. And he said, "Can you see my hand?" And we all went, "Yeah." And then he turned the lights off and he said, "Can you see my hand?" And we all went, "No." And then he turned on a light and he said, "Can you see my hand?" And we went, "Yeah." And he said, "That's everything you need to know about lighting. What can you see and what do you want to see?" And I was like, that's kind of brilliant. And then he took his hand away, so the light was there, and he said, "Can you see my hand?" And we're like, "No." "But can you see the wall?" "Yes." "Bad lighting. We talk to hands, not walls." And I was like, that is kind of genius. The longer I went on in my career, I was like, that guy's philosophy of what is the light, what story is the lighting telling? What do we want to see? And what's the drama of that? Because then he would move the light from the front, the back, and he just described with his hands, basically, side lighting, front lighting, back lighting, top lighting, etc. And you, in one sort of 10-minute class, part of a class, you had basically the basis of, I would say, the artistic side of how do you paint, how do you create with light. And I've never forgotten it, and I'm very grateful to him for it.
Well, Paul, you work with a lot of young artists, singers, directors, designers, and I've seen you work with assistant directors who are very young, many of them very famous now under your tutelage. How do you teach them about lighting? What do you tell them about how to light a show with a lighting designer?
What do I tell them? I tell them to listen to people like you. I tell them to sit at the desk and absorb and take notes on everything and ask questions. But really, don't just sit there waiting for the lights to go on. Be active, be an active participant in watching how you communicate with a board operator, because as we all know, a shitty board operator is a shitty show. It's really that simple. But one of the things I begin with young directors is to say the last artistic element of any theatre endeavour is the lighting. It's the last thing to be added, always. Therefore, it's the most under pressure. Therefore, it's the most that has to catch up. And you've got to be ready for that. You've got to hit the ground running. And also, I would also insist to younger colleagues, whatever this vision is you have in your head, keep a good 15 to 20% compromise either side, because it may or may not happen. And you need to understand that you can spend 5 hours trying to light, the head of a banister or something like that, but then you're missing the rest of the play. How to use time correctly, get the broad strokes in, and then refine over other rehearsals or or brush-ups. But my main thing is to understand, if you understand the technique of lighting, I don't need to operate a board, I don't need to read the plot, but I can. But you need to be able to understand what pressure people are under and what you can achieve realistically in the time. Always pushing the envelope, of course. But if you don't understand that, you're going to feel very frustrated because you're simply out of the communication loop. And that communication loop, you gents have both been in this situation with me on shows where we're like, we know this is crap, we know we need to catch it up, but let's move on and get a broad stroke in before we go anywhere else.
The structure is sometimes the most important thing.
So we have a lot of students who listen to this show, and we always get this question. And whenever we get a question like this, I say, God, I wish Paul was on the show today. So what skills should young designers learn to work overseas? In other words, how do I get jobs overseas?
How do you get jobs overseas?
How do you get gigs overseas? And do they need any special skills?
Well, I don't know. You just need to know a director that's going to take you overseas, which means you've got to have impressed the director with the artistic and technical quality of your work. If you do go overseas and you're somewhere like Italy or Russia or Germany, it's number one, a better question is, what can you expect if you go overseas? It's a very different way of working from what would essentially be, I would call the Anglo way, the American and English way or British way. And sometimes you're under a lot more pressure with that. Also, very often you'll have people in a theatre that do speak English if you don't speak those languages. But if you don't speak those languages, you are entirely dependent on an interpreter, and you need to know how to use an interpreter extremely well. How do you get the gig? You got to know a director that's going to give you the gig. When you get the gig, what do? Keep in mind, you're not in America. Not everybody understands the same terminology. Not everybody uses the same instruments. Not everybody uses the same boards. You need to react to what's in front of you. Contact the theatre ahead of time. Ask them what's in their rig. Ask them if they need to rent stuff. Ask them if they have stuff in repertoire. If it's a repertoire theatre, you're going to be very limited. A lot of American theatres are not repertoire theatres. Some festivals are, like Santa Fe, where you've got to stick to that. Then there's the other added thing of everything that you normally do at a board with a director and with a board op. You've now got to do that slowed down by an interpreter who may or may not understand what you're talking about. So don't speak in jargon to an interpreter, because the interpreter is never going to really understand what cyan or frost or any of those things is. Make it clear what it is you're talking about. Make them do a vocabulary list of what you need them to say. And certainly never talk in slang or anything like that, because it just gets very confusing and wastes time. It gets very frustrating. But why would you do that going abroad? Because actually I think you can learn a lot. And I think going abroad to learn how people do it in other countries just sharpens your own skills. It just makes you a smarter designer, because it's really like working in those big theatres like Covent Garden or the Met or whatever. You've got to hit the ground running at their pace. You can't say, okay, we're just going to, let's pass a ball between us and feel the space. No. Hey, your rehearsal's at 9 o'clock. You better be ready. You better have your plot out. You better have the board operator with a finger poised to do the first click on there. You better be totally onto it. Another thing, if that board operator does not understand that board, fire them within the first 5 minutes. Do not tolerate. Why? You're going to spend the next week way behind because that person doesn't know the board. Why would you do that? And if you don't fire them, I will.
Well, maybe this segues into Mrs. Curran's opera shop.
Mrs. Curran's opera shop? Well...
Tell us about it.
Tell us about it.
Please.
So, Mrs. Curran's opera shop is what I call my career, really. For this reason, I think there are two people. There's Paul and there's Mr. Curran. Mrs. Curran's opera shop is what I refer to when I shut the shutters. Don't take your work home with you. When I get questions like, oh, what are we going to do tomorrow about that scene in Act 2? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm having my dinner. Go away. I'll fix that tomorrow because I know I can fix something in 5 minutes tomorrow, not worrying about it tonight.
Darling, there's an Aperol Spritz on the table.
Yeah, don't piss me off that I'm having an Aperol Spritz. Not going to work. So Mrs. Curran's Opera Shop is what I'll usually say when people say, oh, can we discuss blah, blah, blah? And I'll be like, no, I'm sorry, Mrs. Curran's Opera Shop is shut. Please leave a message. We'll get back to you at our earliest convenience. And it's just a way, Steve, of me saying to myself, I need brain space. I need to have an Aperol Spritz. I need to have a laugh with the guys. We need to go to a restaurant. But I'm not going to spend 24/7 thinking about this gig because it's a complete waste of energy. And I would encourage any young theatre person, take your work enormously seriously. Don't take yourself that seriously. Just, you get more. I mean, sometimes I've found more can be achieved around a dinner table than with a console and sitting in a dark theater, because suddenly you come up with the idea. But it's just a way of me saying to myself, relax, it's not all that important, fix it tomorrow.
Love it.
Well, and I also think you hit on something that lends to the question asked before about getting jobs overseas, and it's really getting jobs anywhere, is that when you walk out of the theater where you've been professional all day and you've been working hard, you have to also be someone that's fun to be around. Because, Paul, you're not going to take David or me to Italy if we're all stick in the mud all the time.
Certainly not.
So that's the.
Well, he probably doesn't want to bail you out all the time either.
Well, there's a fine balance, isn't there?
No, but it's just real simple. Is, you know, our work and what we do all day, every day in our work is one thing. But as I said at the beginning of this, I need a team that I want to work with because I don't even particularly like David Jacques, let's be honest. Never really liked him. But I put up with him because he's good. I'm only kidding, I adore him. But what I'm saying is that you don't, you know, it doesn't need to be palsy-walsy and all of that. It really helps. But you need to be able to trust those people, that they're in your corner and you're in theirs. I've had to fight for things for both of these gentlemen as the director to the management, to make sure things happen, things that were promised or things that are necessary. And equally, they'll protect me. If there's somebody that I don't want to be around, I had a horrible experience once with a lighting designer who, let's say, liked to drink or ate. And this person just never showed up to anything social. We never went for a drink with this person. We never did anything like that. And it was a problem because the person was not a part of the team. The person ostracized himself in the team. So it meant when we were in the theater, there was next to no communication. There was just a very narrow viewpoint from somebody, which was hard. But
well, that sounds like someone who doesn't treat theater as a company, you know, and as a family. I mean, I think that's why we all got into theater. Because if we wanted to just be about us, we'd be fine artists. You know, we wouldn't be creating with a group of people.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. More than once when people say, oh, you know, your production of how did you come up with this? And I'm like, well, I didn't. I guided a team. If I've done anything, I've guided a team. And I'll take the rap for things because eventually it's my responsibility. But I expect the team to come up with ideas. As I said earlier, I may or may not use the ideas. You may or may not use my ideas. But the ideas are about the piece. They're about the production. They're not about me. The piece and the production are bigger than me. So again, I need somebody that I can trust to say, a brilliant example. We did La Donna del Lago at the Santa Fe Opera, and then we had to take it to the Metropolitan Opera. So the Metropolitan Opera does not have what Santa Fe has, which is a view 55 miles to Los Alamos out the back and spectacular scenery. So we had to redo this. And I brought Driscoll in because I said, I think we need projections to add that whole part. And we need to fill this. Otherwise, we're just going to be looking at a black wall all night. And that was I think that was a wise decision on our part because I knew Driscoll and I knew what he would do. He did two things that were kind of remarkable. The first one was we looked at stock footage of Scotland and various other things we needed for the piece. He discovered the price was astronomical, and actually it was cheaper for him and Amy and an assistant to fly to Scotland and film it. Which is what he did. Free holiday in Scotland, him and Amy and his assistant filmed all this stuff in Loch Katrine, and it was spectacular. And then the production in the Metropolitan Opera owned it, so they could revive it. Otherwise, you'd be paying a fortune per minute.
Immediately after getting hired, they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to stream this, and for our for the live HD stuff around the country, and we're going to make a DVD of it." And that changed all the rules.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Did you come up with this idea, Driscoll? Because it's brilliant. I mean, that's amazing.
People film all the time. I never had the opportunity, right? Because it takes a budget, which fortunately the Metropolitan Opera has a budget, but this was how we solved that gigantic problem.
I mean, to be honest, we could have done it upstate New York, but I'm just going to say,
like Scotland?
I'm just going to say there may have been whiskey involved. Just saying.
Thank you, Deanston Distillery.
Thank God it wasn't set in the Bronx.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah, that would have sucked.
So the other thing that Driscoll did that, again, represents what it is to be part of a team is Peter Gelb is a very, very picky general director of anything. And as we're doing stuff, while you're rehearsing at the Met, Gelb is across the corridor. He's not in his office. He's across the corridor from you. He's sitting there, across the aisle, I mean. He's sitting there watching everything you do at his own desk. And if he doesn't like it, he certainly lets you know. So, of course, not understanding what process is, Gelb gets up and he's like, "Oh, is that what it is?" And what was brilliant to work on with Driscoll was that I'd be like, "Peter, we need about 20 minutes. It's not quite there yet. We're balancing light against video. The contrast is knocking one and the other out, so we're getting zero of anything, but give us about 20 minutes. We need to do this." So I'm trying to calm him down. At the same time, Driscoll is like, all I can hear is this kind of, bang, 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 as he's going away on the computer with his guys. And in less than 20 minutes, literally 10 minutes, he's like that. "What about this?" And it's done. It was there. Bang. It's just totally there. It was the same when we did Santa Claus together in Dallas. So having somebody like that in your team, I know can react to something and knows I expect you to react to something and improve it and not just sit there and burst into tears and say, "Oh my God, I need a hug." That was never happening.
The issue that we ran into, we really discovered it when the movie reel set piece came out of the ground. This thing that looked amazing in Santa Fe all of a sudden looked fake against our 4K footage because we had a postcard and then this false scenery. And the fix was just making everything a moving oil painting.
Yeah. I remember we went to, our imagery was Edvard Munch. We went to Munch paintings, didn't we? And we sort of put it through a filter of making it a little more of a moving painting rather than an actual video, which you did with incredible speed and looked spectacular. And on the DVD, looked fantastic.
I have to throw out one little anecdote. So I love technology, and the reason I have never left Facebook is for this very story. I had worked on Baden-Baden with Paul, and we had a great time. And he was talking about working on going to the Met with this production that he had at Santa Fe, and he was talking about Dwayne Schuler and all of these fancy people. And I was like, man, I would love to do that. There's no way, that would ever happen. And so probably 5-6 months later, I get this Facebook message from Paul. It says, "Hey, what are you doing in 2015? I don't know. And he's like, "Do you want to do a show together?" And I said, "Sure." And I was trying to play it real cool because I knew Paul, but like we were new friends. So I waited until I was on a flight actually to LDI, and I was like, "Okay, it's been 2 weeks. I've played it cool. Hey, Paul, what's this gig you were asking about?" And he writes back, "La Donna del Lago at the Metropolitan Opera." And I had just like about dropped everything on the floor, and I was like, "Oh my God." But I love that it all came across via Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, good job you didn't drop your pretzels and free glass of water in Delta there.
Exactly.
That would have been a disaster.
Oh my God. So Paul has a question for us.
Gentlemen, as professional light designers, can you tell me your opinions about technology, noise of instruments, and opera? And when will the fabulous technology of rock and roll that we never hear because we don't hear those motors and fans going because rock and roll is so loud be silent enough to work in a theatre? Haha, for an opera. That's my question. Let me explain why. There's a lot of effects you can do with moving lights, and we all know and love working with moving lights because they're so fast. There's a problem in opera, which is opera, often like a play, has many, many moments of great silences or just incredibly quiet music. And the last thing you need is like in the beginning of Act 3 of Tristan and Isolde, is because you're like, oh, that's real sensitive. Man's dying, gorgeous.
You know, it's funny that you brought that up. San Francisco Opera years ago were the very first opera company to use moving lights. And this is in the 80s. This is early. And in fact, it was Verilight. And they had gone to see a rock and roll concert. And the very reasons you talk about, they wanted them. So they brought them in. And they did everything they wanted them to do. And you're absolutely right. They had never heard 40 lights move at the same time together. And it went across the opera. So there was a lot of running and panicking, and the lights couldn't move except at certain times. I think we're getting there. I think all the industries, you know, when you look at the major players, I think we're getting there with noise control.
I mean, people are still gun shy.
There's not
projectors.
a moment I'm in the theater that I'm not aware of it, and I think about it.
I know, Steve, one of the things David and I have done is we'll stage lights during a loud bit. So we'll program it to stage when bang, bang, bang's going on so that it's actually in focus by the time we need it for a very quiet bit. Because there's no point, and a lot of general directors will just say, you can't have that, no, or whereas conductors, the problem with conductors is that they're the closest to the bloody lights.
Well, the first time the conductor looks up, you know you're dead. You know you're dead right there.
Paul and I discovered this a long time ago because we were working with very loud lights because we've been working together for like 20 years now using earlier generations of the technology. Nowadays, they're actually very, very quiet. Many moving lights don't have fans at all, and the whole introduction of LED technology has created lights or less temperature demands on the lights, so the fans could be a lot smaller, a lot quieter. Real bad noise is the fan noise.
It becomes the bed of the room. They just don't realize.
What drove me crazy, and Paul probably remembers it, and I think it did happen on Tristan at Fenice, which is a beautiful theater, but it's relatively small, and it's extremely live acoustically. And they have a bunch of Mac 2000s there, which are one of the noisiest early generation lights. And we were in the middle of a rehearsal, and I was going crazy. And I turned to Paul and said, am I the only one who really cares about this noise? It's insane. It's absolutely, totally insane. Yeah. But we never got a complaint from that particular conductor.
No, you wouldn't, because he was still trying to study the score, because he didn't know it. Hello. Still had no clue. No clue what the fuck happened next. He was very nervous. Yeah.
Well, there's a certain level the conductor will put up with. I mean, over the years, they've understood that a park hand kind of goes ping, ping, ping while it heats up, and it goes ping, ping, ping while it cools down. It's that fan noise. That ambient fan noise is a killer.
Okay, so we've done a lot of shows together, Paul. We've lit many shows together. And one thing I have learned is not to try sneaking any obvious gobos into the lighting design. Tell us about your opinions of gobos and gobo abuse.
Gobo abuse.
Gobo abuse.
I think gobos in their day were fantastic and helped give an atmosphere and a coverage, etc., to something that just, was not there before. But these days we have gobos and moving lights. We have them, all over the place. To me, one of the worst, and again, it's a personal opinion, when I see a gobo splattered all over a wall in a horrible hard focus, I'm like, this is just a Christmas show. This is a high school show where nobody knows how to do anything. I think it looks cheap and I think it looks lazy. Unless it's done, and you've certainly learned with me over the years, David, to do this, where you think I don't notice, but of course I have. notice that there's a gobo in there, which when used cleverly is fantastic. But when I'm literally seeing, this is if I go upstairs and I see 3 hard, solid focuses on the floor of sort of diamonds and stars and shit. And I'm like, I'm sorry, did Elton John leave the... I didn't know Elton John was in this show. Where is the Elton John bit?
I just want to point out that Elton John and Mariah Carey have always spoken highly of you.
So why the gobo thing? It's because when you're, I think when you're shaping a story, when you're shaping the light for a story and the emotion and all of that, a gobo, of course, can work. I remember we used gobos at La Scala for the forest in the first and the third acts. But the way we did it, you wouldn't say, oh, that looks like an ugly gobo. It was a part of the design because it was artfully done. It wasn't just, like often you go to a rock concert or worse, a drag show, and like, bang, here's the gobo, bang, right in your face. Oh, assaulted by
more
a gobo.
Bad lipstick.
When you're looking at more gobo than hair and makeup in a drag queen, there's a problem.
Speaking of which, I understand you have a question
Speaking
for
of
us.
David Jacques,
Only on Thursday nights, and you know that better than anyone, Madam Curran.
So,
Okay,
Paul,
Steve,
you
go.
have a question for us now.
yes, I have a question for you. Gentlemen, what do you think is the next great, let's say, fantasy invention in lighting? What's the next big thing that will be added in to the technology and art of lighting?
It's Drone Focus Deluxe. What can I tell you? It's a drone with a light on it that can fly to any part of the theater.
Because they're so super silent, drones.
Well, no.
They are
They're going to
just
have to be
fans,
silent.
nothing but fans.
That's right.
Pure
fans.
Not even encased fans, like open fan. Let's have 50 open fans buzzing in the theater.
It'll dry your hair. If you're out in the audience and your hair's a little wet, your hair will be dry by the end of Act 1. So,
Right.
But okay, I don't know. What do you guys think? New technology.
Well, clearly it's not gobos.
Death to gobos, down with gobos.
Those guys over at Evoke are doing some great, what feels like hologram work at the LaGuardia terminal. Not that that's new, but the way they're doing it is a new approach, and I think it's pretty magical.
I don't know. I think the next thing is going to be somehow moving lights console TV. There's going to be some kind of breakthrough there. I'm not sure what it is. There's going to be maybe some interface between that and camera, the robotic cameras that are being used now. There's going to be something there.
Right. I agree with you, Steve. I kind of think of it as lighting Teslas. That there's something between taking a show from one venue to another in a computer program that can focus on it like a Tesla's camera is looking everywhere, that can focus on the space and adapt, the disk or whatever, the memory stick, to this new space.
Basically like Black Tracks are doing. We use those on Cockerel in Santa Fe. They basically gave a map, because they just had little...
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Those beacons. But that would be, if it is, but if you could incorporate the camera the way that some of the video softwares are, have it's like Omnical with Disguise, where it maps the whole space as a cloud. So if you could do that with a moving light and just know,
I was actually chatting with the cats from Black Tracks at LDI a few years ago, is they're talking about just doing an environment that's completely created by projectors and using Black Tracks and having it much more as a interactive theater world and space that you can create like these magnificent dramatic and visual spacescapes.
Like a holodeck from Star Trek?
Like a holodeck. Actually, that's pretty good. It's like a holodeck, actually. And we're not that far away from that technology. Not the holodeck, but the technology of being able to be able to map out a space and create a space, and then to have all these sensors on dancers and people who are moving through it. That all of a sudden you're living in a whole created virtual world. So I think all the virtual reality and enhanced reality and all that other stuff they're calling it nowadays, that is really what's happening.
So, Paul, what advice would you give young theater artists just getting into the business during these challenging times?
That's a very interesting question. The first thing I'd say is don't despair. There is no need for despair. It's very easy to go into oh my God, it's all going badly. It is going badly. I get news for you. It kind of always goes badly. Not as badly as this, but it goes badly. Just don't despair because, hey, the theater world recovered from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, lots of the Nazis in Germany, etc. It recovered from a lot of things. It will recover from this. So the first thing is to not go down that road of negativity. But if, for example, I think things are picking up now. I'm just about to go to London to do a show. So things are starting to open up. But in this time in between, certainly use your time well. Don't just sit there with your head in your hand saying, I'm never going to get a job. Study something, read a play, read a book, read about lighting. Take a course on online or just watch stuff online. But really, don't let it get to you. It's easier said than done, but it has to be done. You can't just sit there. I think of a certain generation. Now, this is the bit where I get very patronizing about millennials. That's because I got a husband that's a millennial. But it's very easy to get like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to survive. You're going to get over it. Just get over it. If I had done that my whole life, I was thrown out of home when I was 16 years old. And I couldn't just sit there in the freeway doing hitchhiking saying, what am I going to do? I was like, I need a lift. I need to go. I need to move. I need to do stuff. And I'd say the same thing to young theatre people. Make sure that while we're in this down period, you're still making contacts. You're looking at what other people are doing. Teach yourself something new. Teach yourself, a little bit of Italian. Teach yourself a little bit of history. Teach yourself about what directors do for a living. Read biographies of various actors, directors, writers, whatever. Any of those things, fill it in. But above all, don't despair, but use your time wisely. Video games, just don't. My husband's going to hate me for saying this because he's obsessed with them. Just don't. Why? Great stuff for hand-to-eye coordination. Eventually, for me, and I'm just not the video game generation, but the problem is the guys and girls that make the video games are smarter than you. They're always going to be ahead of you in the curve. So it ends up like really bad pornography. It's just not going to go well for you. You're just going to have to keep catching up because they're going to be ahead of you in all the games. I think it's a great thing occasionally. I think if it's an obsession, it becomes a complete waste of your time because you could be using that time to learn about history, to learn about music, to learn about a show. That's what I would say. Yeah, don't despair. Use time, enjoy, make contacts, look up people, send resumes out, talk to people. Hey, give me a job. I've always said the same thing. When you ask somebody for a job, they're going to say one of two things, yes or no. I've yet to know a director or a company that said, I curse and damn your family to the eternal flames of hell. It's not Game of Thrones. They're not going to say that. And the more you get used to the word no, the better you're going to find it. So what do you do right now? It's challenging. It's not that challenging. I just did my 16th cancellation this morning. Number 16. Is it a pain in the ass? Absolutely. Is it a little bit worrying? Absolutely. Is it going to get to me? Certainly not. No. And that's not just being blind. That's me saying, okay, what do I do with that time? Find another gig, ask for another gig, contact people, do whatever. Proactive. Be proactive.
And learn how to paint.
And I've learned how to paint. I've discovered I can paint. Yes.
Whatever you channel into something creative.
Yeah.
And beautiful painting, Paul.
Thank you.
Absolutely gorgeous. So listen, thank you, Paul, for being with us on Light Talk today. We've wanted to get you on the show for 4 years now.
Whatever.
we finally
okay.
did. Oh, your schedule was like just too much. I mean, we couldn't work it around all these openings. But, now you're going to get busy again, and we're
now
gonna
you have no life
soon.
and career. As a choreographer once said, I scraped the bottom of the barrel and then I thought of you.
Ouch! Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way, you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Fleck, Flocked Flare and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until all retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers. Coming to you from Long Beach, San Francisco, the Big D, and from deep in the heart of Texas.
And tune in next week when we interview master video designer Bob Bonyol here on Light Talk.
All that and a new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So thank you, Paul, and we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.
Toodles.
Later.